Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 14th chapter of Proverbs. And the way we divided this one was we read and commented on the first 20 verses in the preceding lesson. So even though there's less that we're going to comment on here, one of the things I've been communicating consistently is that beginning in the 10th chapter, the orders are somewhat scrambled. There's more often than not no conceptual connection or resemblance from one verse of Proverbs to the one which comes after it or the one that comes before it. But in the 14th through 20th verse, we read of character types, their outcomes, their outlooks, what happens to them. But what I want to do in review is emphasize the word fool, which appears most prolifically in the verses we've already covered in greater detail. So in the opening verse, every wise woman has built her house, but the foolish breaks it down with her hands. So the woman, he's not speaking of physically building a literal house, but house is a homemaker and house is a family. So this would have been the only closest thing to a professional opportunity that a woman would have had in the ancient world was a homemaker. But there exists constructive potential for the wise and destructive potentials for the fools, just as in anything else. Verse 3, in the mouth of a fool is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise guard them. So pride is connected to foolishness. It is foolish to exalt oneself at the expense of others, and it is dangerous to exalt oneself at the expense of one's maker. That is why pride is a grievous sin and a wellspring of sin, as is foolishness. From foolishness springs foolish actions, foolish thoughts, which prompt foolish actions, and foolish motivations, and just foolish plots and schemes. And they're going to make themselves known by the mouth of the fool. So within their words are going to be expressions of pride, which are not exactly flattering to the fool. Leave the presence of a foolish man, for you shall not perceive the lips of knowledge. So if you are who you surround yourself with, the old slogan, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. If you surround yourselves and gravitate with foolish people by proxy of their presence, because they cannot perceive the lips of knowledge, you will become who you surround yourself with, and you will be similarly cognitively diminished from their influence and presence. So leave them, flee from them. Don't have anything to do with them. The wisdom of the clever is to understand his way, but the folly of fools is deceit. So wise people know what they're doing, they know why they're doing it, they know how they're doing it, but fools are so deceitful by their nature. They're guided, the foolishness is deceitful in itself, and it is a wellspring. Foolish people rely upon deceit because they are motivated by a deceitful spirit, whereas the wise one who walks in the way of Elohim will know what he is doing, why he is doing it, and how he is doing it, and where he is doing it, and all the rest. They will know what they are living for. Next verse, fools scoff at guilt, but among the straight there is delight. So fools, they mock and belittle the very idea of guilt. Guilt is to the conscience what pain is to the body. It's our sensory perceptor that tells us we are in dangerous territory. When we are guilty, we should feel guilty for our sin, and then it can only be broken by forgiveness, but fools won't even have the guilt from which lays the foundation of forgiveness. So without that guilt, you cannot be forgiveness, and it's going to escape fools because they are foolish and they mock and belittle the reality or the significance of guilt or the usefulness of it. Verse 12 doesn't exactly contain the word fool, but it does speak of the foolishness of man. So there is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Seems, that word is indicative of appearance, so not everything is on the surface as it seems or appears. So we have to unlock and unlayer the subterranean truth, which demands diligence. And I think if I didn't already connect it to Jeremiah 17:9, I'm going to do it right here, just to reiterate or to launch for the first time. One of the reasons that man is wayward and easily led astray and inclined to march himself straight off the death to hell, off the cliff to hell and death, is because the human heart is described as deceitful, remember that word from verse 8, and desperately wicked. So the wickedness on top of its deceitful nature and inclination. Fools think with their heart. God wants you to think with your mind, because the human heart is in the diagnosis as delivered through Jeremiah, an effectively worthless cognitive compass. We have to rely on the word, and the way of death, the antithesis of the way of life, is the straight and narrow way to salvation, and also the covenant way from the New Testament vantage point. Verse 16, the wise fear and turns away from evil, but a fool rushes on and is reckless. So wise know evil for what it is. They're not succumbing to the lure of the deception that it is something good and something fun and exciting. They will recognize its evil qualities and flee and turn away from it, go the other way, repent. But a fool will, just be so consumed by the sensation of immediate gratification that he will stumble in recklessly into his own ruin. The simple shall inherit folly, but the clever are crowned with knowledge. So folly is not exactly related or synonymous with fools, but it is what springs from foolish. We learn simple people are gullible. They are, simple-minded. They believe whatever they say. And these people shall inherit the foolishness of believing everything they say at face value without doing the research or investigation into the truth of the matter. And so we're going to open with the 21st verse. He who despises his neighbor sins, but he who shows grace to the poor, oh, blessed is he. So how we treat other people is of significance in our standing in heaven. To despise the neighbor, our love for our fellow man is reflective of and exists in simultaneous proportion to our love for the source of all love. So if we are submitted to him in love and faith and submission, then he will give us the ability to love beyond our capacity to love. Not every one of our neighbors is lovable, but if we despise them, that's a sin. We have to get along with the people God places in our lives and in our paths, and he has a special concern for the poor. So we who are advantaged and privileged, we don't have to do anything to make their lives better, but we should. And if we show favor to the poor, oh, blessed is he, because God's going to show favor to us when we reflect his concern for the needy, the hopeless, the oppressed, and the vulnerable. Do not those who plan evil go astray, but kindness and truth are to those who plan good. So from plans spring actions, and there are strategies that for criminals and evangelism alike. So wicked people sit down and plot and think of new ways to do evil. It seems in the day we live that people are sitting down and spending time thinking up of new ways to do evil, new ways to hate, new way to violence, new ways for sex perversion. It is off the charts these days. So there is an element in planning. So our mind motivates our feet and our hands, what we do and where we walk and who we hang around with. So planning usually involves more than one person, but kindness and truth from good intention spring good results. So those who plan good, those who strategize about how to bring the best betterment and improvement to those they interact with to be a blessing unto them, will have the assurance that they will have kindness and truth. In all labor there is profit, but talk of the lips only to poverty. So there is a such thing as an all talk, no action individual. These are the world seems divided into three types of people: the dreamers who dream big, but nothing ever comes of it; the ones who talk big, they say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, but their mouth never motivates their feet. And then there are those who are diligent and painstaking and laborious, who witness to see their dreams fulfilled through hard works, because dreams cannot be wished into reality. They must be labored and attended to and diligently. And so in all labor, in any variety or component, whether it's to any discipline or the accumulation of wealth, there is profit. But the talks of, If you just spend all your time yapping about what you're going to do, you're going to be reduced to poverty because you're not going to take the necessary action which matches the intentions of your words in your mind. So it's not enough to have dreams. Our idealism must be counterbalanced by realism. We have to, in order to make our ideals become real. The crown of the wise is their wealth, but folly of fools is folly. So the wise are crowned, they are biological royalty by their sheer intelligence, and this is an oversimplification to suggest that wisdom automatically generates wealth, but in Solomon's case it was certainly true. He was the wisest as well as the wealthiest man who ever lived, according to the promise. Genghis Khan and a few other trillionaire rulers might have been wealthier than him, but he's up in the top 10. And of course, Yahshua accepted he is the wisest human to ever grace the earth. He was supernaturally endowed with such. But the folly of fools is folly, so that just means they're a vicious cycle that leads nowhere. Nothing original. You reap what you sow, so if you're a fool, you reap folly and you sow the same. A true witness saves lives, but he who breathes out lies is a betrayer. Now, this is certainly applicable to personal evangelism. Our personal witness and testimony of God can bring others, save them from death and hell and spiritual death. But the context in which Solomon is writing is in a courtroom setting. So according to the Mosaic law, by 2 or 3 witnesses could a condemned criminal be condemned, and the lack thereof they would be acquitted, and according to the same law, the witnesses would throw the first stones, so in cases of capital punishment. A true witness can save lives. If you tell the truth when you can save someone's life in court, why wouldn't you? But lies belong to the mouth of the betrayer. The betrayer is a betrayer of trust, so one of the ways they earn the trust they betray is through lies. They have the veneer of truth and the artificial aura of being sincere, and sincerity can be faked, and so some superficially sincere people may be deceitful betrayers. In the fear of Yahweh is strong trust, and his children have a place of refuge. So Solomon has a lot to say about the fear of Yahweh. It is, first off, a faithful fear. So when we think of fear and faith, we generally think of opposites. No more than any man can serve 2 masters can fear and faith reside in the same vessel at the same time. But a fear of Yahweh is that which respects his ability and his authority to send you to hell and responds accordingly. So the fear of Yahweh eliminates all other fears. If we truly fear him, we will not fear the pain of the martyr's crown or torture or anything else, because what happens to our body, it seems like the end of the world when it's happening to it, but it will one day pass, whereas the fear of Yahweh is an investment with eternal dividends. It is a strong trust, a good investment, and as the children of Yahweh have a source of refuge. No matter what they're going through, they can always look up and find grace and strength. Even when they are weak, they may be strong. This is the paradox that the Apostle Paul discovered with the thorn in his flesh, and I did one on that. You can type in Corey Johnston, 2 Corinthians 12:1-2, strength in weakness, a paradox explained. The fear of Yahweh is a fountain of life, to turn away the snares of death. So as early as 1:7 and 9:10, all throughout the places, he establishes that the fear of Yahweh is the foundation of wisdom. It's the submission and respect and reverence for the omniscient one, from whom all knowledge springs, will be a wellspring and source of knowledge and life. In this context, a fountain of life means that its life extends beyond its adjacent proximity, but spreads around and abound and just all over the place. So it is not limited to one location. It brings life wherever it goes. And the opposite of life is, of course, death. So if you fear Yahweh, you are turning away the snares of death. And remember what we read in the 12th verse, there is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. So we don't know better than he knows better, and as such we ought to be respectful and submissive and reverent towards the author and counselor and guider of all and provider of all knowledge and wisdom. In a multitude of people is a king's splendor, but in the lack of people is the ruin of a prince. So Solomon is writing from a royal perspective. He was a king. That was his job, to rule not just any nation, but the covenant nation of the Almighty people on earth, to whom his ancestor was promised descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky or the sand on the seashore. So wherever Abraham would look, he'd have a reminder of the promise, which he would not live to see, but Solomon would witness the nation at its strongest apex. His reign witnessed a golden age, and he's just stating a simple fact that a king is not the end-all, be-all. They do not make the country, they define it largely, but they do not make the country. The strength of any nation is in the number and quantity of the people, and what good is having a throne or a court without people to lead or serve you, or you serve them? It's a mutual symbiotic relationship, sovereign and subject. He who is patient has great understanding, but he who is short of spirit exalts folly. So patience, and there's an endurance aspect in understanding. We all remember those marathon study sessions to master subjects we couldn't otherwise master. It demanded patience and endurance and long-suffering, and just the ability to endure mental anguish and pain while we were in the process of learning. But through patience, we were perfected through the path in the spirit, in fact, in reality of our patience, to gain the understanding and to pay the price, the necessary price and pain to gain that understanding. But short of spirit, if we are not patient, we're just going to give folly the space and attention and recognition that wisdom by right ought to receive from us. So if we throw in the towel early and just give up on understanding and increasing and amassing and accumulating knowledge, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to treat foolishness like it was wisdom, and we're going to treat wisdom how foolishness deserves to be treated. A healthy heart is life to the body, but envy is rotten to the bones. So the implicit inference is that envy is not a symptom of a healthy heart. Envy is the origin of a lot of sins. It is a sin in itself and a wellspring of sin. It is closely connected to the sin of covetousness, which forms the capstone of the Decalogue. That's when you see the possessions of others, be it their house, their car, their wife, their farm animals, and you covet it, you secretly want it, and that leads, so that's the attitude which shapes a lot of the actions of the 5 prior Decalogue commandments, the righteous commandments. So from that, thievery, adultery, all springs from covetousness, and often so too does murder. So that's the, so it just has a rotting, corroding, corrupting, sickening effect, which extends beyond the heart, and it goes into the very bones. You really feel the envy consumes you. It's an all-consuming, bitter passion, but the healthy heart will give you life to the body. It will give you meaning to your life. It will not just pump the blood we need to sustain life, but the heart is more symbolically and emotionally, we're talking about its physical function versus its emotional qualities we ascribe to it. That is a source of life and a wellspring of life, and health is connected to long life and quality of life. He who oppresses the poor reproaches his maker, but he who esteems him shows great favor to the needy. Now I just want to give an example of an incorrect, sloppy, lazy exegesis. Whenever I hear a Democratic politician quote the Bible, alarm bells start ringing piercingly loud in my ear. So there's one running for president right now, Pete Buttigieg, who is the most Christian candidate amongst their post-Christian party. Just speaks volumes about how spiritually bankrupt they are. But he used this in defense of a raise of minimum wage, and the fact is that raising the minimum wage will make some poor people richer, but it's going to lead to unemployment. So our economy is not so simple that we can just raise wages, the wealth gap, because it's all tied to job creation. And this is ultimately, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have took the verse in the direction I took it, but I just did, and I have no choice to live with it. But the principle is intact. Oppressing the poor is an offense to the Maker, because he makes the rich and the poor alike in his image. And James compares showing favoritism to the wealthy over the poor in church settings and situations as a vile form of blasphemy in the book which bears his name. But to show favor to the needy is to show proper estimation and respect and reverence and due deference to him, the capital letter him, that is Yahweh on high. By his own evil doing, the wicked is thrust down, but the righteous has a refuge in his death. So the righteous need not fear death, because we have the ironclad certainty and, just this faith that's so strong as to be borderline absolute certain that this life is not the end. There is an expectation beyond this life, and it will be blessed beyond measure or beyond description if we inherit salvation. So that's what we're all about here. But the wicked, they're gonna sink themselves to hell through their own wickedness. Hell is a place designed specifically for the wicked, and its rationale is righteous when we understand the extent between divine perfection and human depravity. Wisdom rests in the heart of him who has understanding, and among fools it becomes known. So this is actually curious. So fools can acquire wisdom without seeking it, just by being around someone who is understanding and patient and wise enough to make their intelligence communicatable to fools. That is a species of wisdom, to spread knowledge beyond the fools. Oftentimes the most intelligent people, there's a gap and a chasm between them and their intellectual inferiors that just cannot be breached, but it is in fact an act of wisdom to spread knowledge and understanding et al., etc., to the fools, because they do in fact have rational capacities. They just choose not to exercise them. It's not that they're necessarily stupid. It could be because they're lazy in using their God-given endowments and just devoting them to self-serving, self-destructive purposes and vices. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to peoples. So prosperity is delusional. So right now the United States of America is more prosperous than ever, but are we more righteous than we have been in the past? And the answer is manifestly no, we are not. We were once a God-fearing, God-exalting nation. We are largely degenerating into a lawless, post-Christian culture and society, replaced by moral relativity and political correctness and just all these evil mores and philosophies. And we legalize sin, so that doesn't make it right. And so the true measure and worth of a nation is its righteousness. So even though the Pilgrims came here with nothing, they were richer than us in their faith. So they were, even before they were a nation, we're in some sense better off then than we are now. The king's delight is towards a wise servant, but his wrath is towards him who causes shame. So Solomon, once more, is writing from the vantage point in the perspective of a royal ruler. He was a king. That was his vocation. That was his trade. That was his job. That was his life. And as such, he would have relied on servants, and there would have been wisdom recognizes his own. So a man like Solomon would certainly be able to detect that quality in other people, and he would have been delighted and blessed and found pleasure in wise servants. But the shameful one, the one who is not similarly wise and causes shame. Sin induces a reproach and a shame to peoples, and if it does the nation, it does also the individual. The macrocosm and microcosm are always mutually reflective. So he reserved wrath for those who were an embarrassment and shame. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.